Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Fire Law Roundup for October 24th of 2022. We're a little bit early this morning, and I'm still trying to wake up a little bit from a long weekend. But it's Kurt Barone and Brad Pinsky, and we're here for Fire Law Roundup. Brad, take us away.
Yeah, first of all, I want to say hi. We had I had a conference, about 70 people there this week for a not-for-profit corporation board of director training. But I said, hey, make sure you follow us on Fire Law Blog, which I hope everybody does. But I know there are some watching today, and hopefully they've subscribed. But some of the issues that I hope we will get more information when it comes to the social media case that we're going to talk about and the policy. We spent a good amount of time talking about that. And I said, hey, we got a good one coming up. But welcome to all of them who hopefully will newly be joining us today.
Brad, was your conference at Turning Stone?
At Turning Stone again, yeah.
Oh, okay, because I know we've got that one coming up in March. Okay,
that's the big one, right?
And you've got an HR conference coming up in
December.
Cool.
December, yep. But the big conference is coming up in March, and we expect over 600 people there this year. So great turnout. So I think people feel like, hey, COVID's over, for the most part, let's get out and return to life. And
I like Turning Stone. I enjoy coming out there. It's a long drive for me, but I enjoy the drive and just getting out there it's
a great venue. I'd love to see us hold for everybody, who follows us. As you know, Kurt and I are talking about doing a much broader scale nationwide HR conference, and Turning Stone is a great venue for anybody who wants to come out. Okay. So, let's start in Massachusetts. My son just raced crew. He's a coxswain for his crew team. He was at the head of the Charles this weekend. So why not start in Massachusetts? And
your
my
kids
old
are in college already? Oh my
God. No, high school.
Oh, high school. Oh, I was going to say, geez.
I think he's going to end up at URI. Not that our listeners care, but
really?
We'll be visiting Kurt in person.
Wow. Well, we'll be able to get him into the fire department down there. So
yeah. So so you and I, Kurt, I think are going to have an interesting discussion on this one. And look, the nice thing, all our viewers know, we get the Monday morning quarterback. We know only what we know from court documents or whatever. We don't always have the background, but I like that we can give our opinions. And, remember, everyone, these are just our opinions about the law. But we're going to start in Massachusetts, where a fire lieutenant he was demoted and fired. But in the same,
I don't know how that works, but
yeah, I assume just to really nail him so he can't get any. I don't know. They demoted him on the same day and then fire him. But nonetheless, he was fired in April. He filed suit. His union has joined him, which we don't see a lot all the time.
I'm not sure about
here.
The standing issue. I think there's a question on the standing, but be that as it may.
Yep. So he was fired. He claims, right? He claims this is just a lawsuit. Not a decision, but he alleges that he was fired because he wore his Class A uniform to the funeral of a firefighter. So look, there had been a long-standing dispute, allegedly, right? I can't stress allegedly enough. We don't know anything. We're just reading from the complaint. But allegedly, the lieutenant has been at odds with his fire chief for years. And there have been a bunch of issues, including the use of the email system for union business. Anyway, at one point in January of 22, this is very recent, he's placed on administrative leave pending a disciplinary hearing on several charges brought by the chief, which sought a demotion and a 60-day suspension. So initially, he's just, looking at being suspended and maybe demoted. But then, and let me read the order, right? He said, until the hearing is scheduled, you remain on administrative leave with pay. That's typical of states. While on paid admin leave, you cannot report for duty in any capacity, must avoid our fire station, and cannot wear a Marlboro Fire Department uniform. Interestingly, they added that, right? And I got to tell you, I do that all the time when I suspend people. I say, you shall not act on behalf of or represent yourself as a member of the fire department all the time. You're not a member. So here that was his restriction. So then a friend of his or a firefighter dies. He goes to the funeral wearing his Class A uniform, which he was just ordered in writing not to wear. I don't know. I question the back of my mind. Was that part of the order? Did they know this individual was going to die? I don't know anything about the death. Was it like, hey, this is going to happen and I don't want you to wear it? I don't know.
A complaint mentions you're talking about very close timing here about several things. One, the firefighter dying. Two, the disciplinary charges. Three, the fact that the union and the union president filed an unfair labor practice charge. So all of those things happen quickly, and then the funeral. So it could be, it may just be coincidence. I'm not sure.
Yeah. So he claims that termination based on his wearing the uniform at a funeral in public, to which anyone could have gone to, right? It's a funeral. But he claimed that's a violation of his rights to free speech, maybe association, but right to free speech. He said, he alleges he was terminated as retaliation for his expression by the First Amendment. And that's really, he goes on with other things, right? He says the underlying suspension was impermissible. So let me stop there for a second. Let me first ask you a question. I'm not even sure the answer, although I think it's no, but I'll be interested in your thought. So here he's going to be terminated effectively for violating the suspension order. Don't wear your uniform. If the suspension order was overturned as impermissible, is that kind of like fruit of the poisonous tree? Everything from there falls? Or do they say, listen, even though, which is my suspicion, even though the original underlying order was not valid, right? The basis of the suspension was not valid, you still violated another order, right? Not to wear your uniform. And it doesn't matter that the reason we told you you're suspended and gave you that order is invalid, you still violated another one. I would think you violate the suspension order, doesn't matter, you violated it, that's a whole separate insubordination charge. What's your thought on that?
I would agree. No, I would agree on that. The problem is when you're talking termination, which is discipline terms, that's the biggest penalty that we have. Usually you don't go to termination for like a first offense. Right. There's going to be accumulation of things. Okay. Now, if the accumulation of things doesn't warrant termination, even with the ignoring of that order, then it may indicate that the termination might be excessive. So I think there's with this particular officer, he's a lieutenant, there was a series of things that had happened. And if those first few things that he had done were protected activities because he was the union president, then I don't think it's going to be upheld as a termination. Now, he still ignored the order, and there should be some consequences to the order. Now, there's another part to this, though. If the order was issued in retaliation for his First Amendment activities, right, activities that as a union president, he has a right to speak on behalf of the union and advocate. He has a right to freedom of association, which is protected by the First Amendment as well. So there could be, and also there could be some collective bargaining aspects to this. This case sounds primarily in constitutional law. There is, my understanding is there's also a proceeding before the Massachusetts State Labor Board on the collective bargaining aspects of this. So like a lot of cases that we see, we've got multiple issues in multiple venues. And he could lose this one and win at the State Labor Board. He could win this one and lose at the State Labor Board. So it's a lot of moving parts to this. So, but to answer the question directly, unlike an attorney, right? I'll try to get right to the point. I think it's possible for him to have violated this order, even if those predicates turn out to be invalid, but it may not warrant termination, may warrant some other form of discipline.
And I gotta say, I don't think wearing a department's uniform is freedom of expression. I don't think it's free speech. I think if, I could come up with some ways it could be free speech, right? But it's the department's uniform, not yours. And they have the right to control the use of their property. And my point for everyone listening is, if you are ordered not to do something, why muddy the waters in your underlying argument by giving them a new and separate, related, but kind of new and separate reason for terminating you? Don't give anyone that basis. If you're told you will not go to an event, if you're told you will not wear a uniform, you will not exercise certain privileges, don't. And as a legal matter, I think this gets the freedom of expression and free speech. Wearing the department's uniform to a funeral, first of all, there's no speech. Speech is respect. I don't think wearing their uniform is protected. It's their uniform, right? I think if you wore something they said was inappropriate with a message on it to a funeral, like, hey, my chief killed this person, okay, maybe that's free speech, right? But if you wear a message, one thing, I don't know that wearing the uniform is either speech or protected, but don't do it. If you're ordered not to do something, don't do it.
Yeah, I think the complaint is kind of worded so that they can argue that the wearing of the uniform is speech. They can argue that, okay? But they can also argue that the punishment for wearing the uniform is retaliation for other speech.
Right.
Okay, so they kind of couch the complaint kind of so they can make the alternative argument. Now, I think what we see in this case, the case was originally filed in state court, and state court judges handle a lot of different things. They handle civil cases, criminal cases, all sorts of things. But then they also can handle constitutional issues as well. What the town, or as a city of Marlborough, what the city did was they took it out of state court and said, there's a federal issue here. We want to have that case heard then by the federal court. And excuse me for a second, I got people trying to call me. What they ended up doing was send it to federal court, and the federal courts are much more narrowly focused. And I think personally, if I'm representing the city, I want to cut through the baloney here, that right. Alternative argument about, well, I got some First Amendment here and I got some First Amendment there. Federal court is going to zero in on this. Right. And whereas the state court could as well, but I just don't think the judges there have the experience level and that. The federal court's going to look at this and say, either you arguably do, or no, you don't. And then where it goes from there, we'll see, because he also included a Massachusetts constitutional claim in there as well under their equivalent of the federal First Amendment.
Yeah, my personal prediction is this gets kicked out. You shouldn't have worn the damn uniform. And why are you doing that to yourself anyway?
My personal prediction is somehow this guy gets his job back. Somehow, whether it's the Mass Labor Board or an arbitrator or the
after
Mass
a period
Civil
of
Service
suspension.
Commission, but somehow, because Massachusetts is very, very pro-labor. And, I think if he wasn't the union president, I think the chief is probably going to win this one. But because he's the union president, if I was a betting man, I'll bet he'll eventually get his job back. That's my prediction.
Well, I presume we're going to see a motion to dismiss filed. You never know. But if it was me, I'd file a motion to dismiss on the law and try to get rid of it.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, from wearing the wrong clothes to wearing no clothes, let's go to Virginia Beach. He's it's not exactly as I said, but he's there's a firefighter facing child porn charges. Again, if this was a plumber, it'd never be in the news. All right. No jokes, anyone. But if this was a plumber, an electrician, or this would never be in the news. Nonetheless, a Virginia Beach firefighter is facing federal child porn charges. I think he connected to the IP of the firehouse. And something I know a lot about because it happened to my fire department. It is interesting. Yeah, I'll talk about it for a second. But he obviously used the internet, the wireless access point of the fire department, and connected and downloaded some porn, child porn. It was on his computer. The FBI found it, seized it, and he's in a he's in a lot of trouble. He downloaded allegedly a large number of pornographic images of children, some as young as 4, before I either throw up or get sick. I'll move on. But if this is true, this guy probably shouldn't be going to schools and doing fire prevention anyway. So this will be the end of him. Yeah, my department had somebody who did this, where he was convicted. But the FBI one day knocks on our door and says, "We're here to take everything." We're here to take all your computers and stuff, wireless access points, everything. People think that if you are on your computer and you connect to the wire, to the internet and the firehouse or whatever, that no one's going to find that. You're nuts. Everything you type, everything you do, internet security logs, all your text and transmissions go through the wireless access point. Now, fire departments, I hope you have a policy having nothing to do with this. I hope you have a policy that says no expectation of privacy using our Wi-Fi. It's all fair game, but the FBI doesn't care. What's that?
And the reason I covered this case, I mean, you raise a good point that if this was a plumber or an electrician or a carpenter, or they worked at Home Depot, whatever, it wouldn't be headlines. There was a connection. Obviously, it was from the firehouse. But here's one of the things. I had the opportunity to go to dinner one night with a retired police officer who helped create the To Catch a Predator program. And he's deeply involved in that whole, he's a computer geek, he's a phenomenal guy. But he explained like how the system works, how easy it is. And it's funny, he said, I'll bet you a year's pay that I can go online right now, and within about 15 minutes, I will have someone online. I'll have a predator online. He says that's how prolific it is. Within 15 minutes, I can have, and the person will be in this general geographic area, and I will have him here within 45 minutes. And he also told me about a certain part of his anatomy, and how that part of his anatomy would be when the person got here. That's how good he was at doing this. He said, I'll bet you a year's pay. Okay. Now, at that point, I said, well, like how common is pedophilia? And I said, is it 1 in 100,000, 1 in 10,000? He laughed. He goes, no. He says, much less. So 1 in 1,000? This is going to shock you. Okay. 1 in 40 adult men is a pedophile.
Oh,
okay. That's like the hidden secret. 1 in 40 adult men is a pedophile. I've seen it up to 1 in 52, down as low as 1 in 38, but 1 in 40 adult men.
Sometimes I feel like it's commercials. You watch these modeling commercials and they're showing these very young looking women in these scantile clothes. Sometimes not that I'm blaming the media and advertising and all that,
but 1 in 40. And I think that includes a thing called thebophile. It includes, people who are beyond just prepubescent, that have a prepubescent interest, that it includes up to, 14, 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, that nature. But here's the point. Do the math for your fire department. And those of you who've been through my discipline class, we go through this because we've got to understand this. It's prevalent. And you either have right now a pedophile, you have had, or you will have a pedophile. That's how prevalent it is. And no doubt, and I'm going to say this as a Catholic, okay? The Catholic Church ends up attracting a lot of them, and they need to do a lot of screening. They do screen, but they need to get a little bit better at that. Boy Scouts, other organizations that give men access to children. This is not a problem for women. There's a lot of things 50-50, male, female. This is not one of them. This is 100% male. And it's something that nobody wants to talk about. And then that puts us at risk in our organizations because we don't recognize that this is a problem. And when my concern, when I discuss this in the discipline class, is that when you couple a pedophile with an officer who's compromised his integrity by maybe bringing a prostitute in the station or doing something else, when you couple an officer whose integrity is compromised with a pedophile working together, that pedophile may feel like, I can do whatever I want. I can bring kids in the station. I can do whatever I want, because if my boss is not going to report me, because I'll just report him for what he's done.
Oh.
And this is a problem. We've got to recognize this. We got to train our officers as well, that, you know, if you're going to be an officer, you cannot compromise your integrity, because if you do, you're now at risk. And I've got a bunch of case studies that where not necessarily pedophiles. There's a couple where pedophiles have tried to do this, but there's a lot more where officers have compromised their integrity, and people that report to that officer feel like they can do whatever they want.
It's interesting you say no one wants to talk about it. So you, I think I've said this maybe last week, but so we're representing 13 fire departments in 13 claims of pedophilia. Of course, they happened in the 60s and 70s. I don't know how I defend these, but nonetheless, you know, where the fire department serves as a charter organization, right? And or allowed just the Boy Scouts to use the firehouse, right? And they don't charter, they're not a charter organization. They just allowed them to use the firehouse, but yet somebody was allegedly, you know, fondled and appropriately touched, whatever, you know, the kids, the scouts, and the scoutmaster did it, but they said, oh, you were at the firehouse, or the firehouse is fire department's charter organization. So that's gotten such big press that at our our March conference, that's going to be one of the topics. So offline, we'll talk about that more, because we definitely need some of that info. Zach is going to give that presentation, I guess, as one of his first. But we're going to talk about preventing these issues in the firehouse, and those stats blow me away.
Yeah.
I mean, slide number one clearly is, holy crap. Okay, yes, but makes total sense why you bring this up. And it also then makes sense why it happened in our fire department many, many, many years ago. But nonetheless, while I was there,
I do want my readers, the folks who read my blog regularly, to understand why I would put something like this in the blog. And you'll see it periodically. And I don't do every single one. I can't possibly do every single one, but right. I want to keep that out there, that this continues to be a problem. It's not going to go away.
Wow.
It's just one of those things that we're going to have to address as leaders.
And can you screen for it? I mean, how do you screen for it? Well, maybe we'll talk more, but if there's no screening process.
I'm studying forensic psychology, so maybe one of the classes will learn about that. But I'm not sure of a way. I think if we actually could screen for it, then we wouldn't be having the problem that the Catholic Church and the Boy Scouts and other organizations like that are having.
Right. Right.
So I tend to think that it's we can screen for some of it, but I'm not sure that it's foolproof.
Well, so I think the point for everybody is it's a major issue. You need to be careful, especially if you're going to run a junior program, or if you're going to have Wi-Fi in your firehouse and allow people to connect with their computers or use your computers. The FBI is going to catch you. They can trace this pretty easily. So, okay, let's leave the porn world here. I got to tell you, that was so disconcerting, your stats. But let's go to Los Angeles, who never, ever escapes a week or a month on your blog. It's not their fault. In any event, we're going to talk about this one. I think that they lose. I had to do a little bit of research. So I had my office this morning do some research. I have some case backing on my opinion here, but let's talk about the facts. So in LA County, there's a firefighter who is probationary, right? So they generally have very few rights, but probationary members still retain their rights not to be subject of violations of their legal statutory rights, right? You can't terminate a probationary person if they're engaging in protected conduct, which is true. I think some people say
race or age or gender or
protected classes. Right. Exactly. Class or conduct. I think some people say, oh, you're probationary, we can fire you for any reason. Not true. Okay. But here, I think this is very weak. My personal opinion, but I'm going to give you a legal basis why. A probationary firefighter resigned, right? First problem, resigned after 10 months on the job, claims due to stress and harassment. He claims he was being harassed because he took leaves of absence in violation of the policy of how he was allowed to take leaves, but nonetheless, he complains he was discriminated against based on the disability of depression because his best friend, right, not a family member, which is critical, but his best friend and a close family member caused him great distress. I don't think he's I don't know. It didn't say. Did you know? Is he family or is he not?
Well, there's two people that passed away. One was a family member. One was his best friend.
Oh, got it.
Two people who passed away. I'm not sure if it was they both were killed in a car accident or whether they both happened to die at about the same time. But both deaths apparently happened in February of 2021.
Okay. So he claims that he was unable to get scheduled work shifts covered, so he could grieve, that people weren't sympathetic, that they were harassing him about it. He claims that he took leaves and the chief told him one thing about his leave of absence, yet the city or the policy says another, so that he violated the policy. But he said, yeah, but the chief told me take as much time as you want. So that's an interesting question. In any event, I want to talk about his disability claim, because a main part of this is you discriminated and retaliated against me for disability. Now, look, family medical leave is probably not an issue, although 10 months, I don't know if he accrued enough time to be covered by FMLA.
You got to work for a year. You got to have 12 months.
Yeah,
right?
So or hours, but he doesn't have it.
Claim.
So FMLA is not here. Otherwise, that would have been a good one. But here we have an ADA claim, and he says, I was retaliated and harassed because of a disability being depression. So that spurred an interesting thought. So we did a little research, and the federal courts have said, yes, being depressed is maybe a medical condition, but unless you can show how the severe depression results in other very clear signs of disability, of depression, and in other words, it has to interfere with your life, your normal life activities. Unless it does, it doesn't rise to the level of being an ADA disability, right? It has to do more than just have minor impacts. It has to severely disable you. So the depression alone isn't enough. It has to have a substantial interference with your regular lifetime activities, like post-traumatic stress, PTSD. People would, okay, it's depression, right? But it interferes. It has to rise to a level to interfere with your work activities. I think he loses because I don't think, frankly, I didn't read the whole complaint. I don't even think his allegations rise to the level of proving it's a disability. I think he's out. But it does raise another issue. That one aside, did the chief change the policy, right? If he's terminated, abandon the ADA claim. He's terminated because you exceeded your leave. If the chief told you one thing and the policy said another, I think the court's going to say, yeah, but the chief told you something else. So if the chief really did say, take as much time as you want, then he has the right to take as much time as he wants, I think.
Well, yeah, but except he resigned. He's not.
Well, right.
The problem is he wasn't terminated for taking too much leave. He ended up resigning. But here's the thing that and this is my assumption about knowing what's going on in firehouses today. Virtually every fire department I know, every career department that I know, firefighters are being ordered to work overtime. It's not a situation where, I remember as a firefighter, I love to work overtime. I would have worked, 24/7 if they'd let me. Okay. No, seriously.
Yeah, I get it.
Money, but I loved it. Okay. So that putting that aside, we're at a point now where firefighters are being compelled to work. So that means every time somebody is off, somebody else is going to get ordered to work in their place. And I think what's happening now is people are resenting, the firefighters are resenting that, and they're openly hostile to people who are perceived as taking advantage of the system.
But what if there's a minimum staffing requirement? How do you make?
That's exactly why they're being ordered to work.
Right.
That's where so the firefighters are getting angry. You have firefighter A who wants to go home, and because firefighter B is off because of psychological conditions,
They got to work
firefighter A
more.
is now angry at firefighter B.
Got it.
So
Yep.
firefighter A, then the next time he sees firefighter B, goes, hey, you whatever.
Right.
I got ordered to work. I missed my my daughter's graduation, or I missed my son's little
Because you
league
took
game, or
off for a
whatever it
BS
is,
reason.
because you're not coming to work, you're not pulling your fair share. So what you have is the administration of the fire department saying one thing, take as much time as you want. You have the rank and file going after people, and now you have this sort of stress level that's happening within within the organization.
Right.
And again, I don't know if that's what's going on here, but when one of the things that I quoted from the case after he informed his colleagues about the stress that he was under, no one would work for him. He was met with apathy, unable to get firefighters to cover for him. Well, yeah, that's probably because they feel like you're malingering and
Right.
they don't want to cover for you, or maybe there's some other things going on. But I don't know. In my experience in the fire service, if you need a hand, I'm to the extent I can possibly do it, I'm gonna help you out. Okay.
Right.
Up to the point where I feel like you're abusing my empathy and kindness, and then I'm going to say no. But most firefighters are going to. So that's what makes me think that maybe there's something else going on.
And look, to all the viewers, right? In no way are Kurt and I being insensitive to depression and those types of things.
Right.
I don't think, based on what he said, that the depression rises to a legal level. But let's assume this was on the job, right? That he witnessed something on the job that caused him stress. There would be no question that there would be a lot more avenues to a legal victory for this individual if it was an on the job injury.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess I see it. You could see how this happens and people get upset.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate. Part of it is fire departments are struggling to get people to hire people. I was in Arizona a couple of weeks ago, and departments that used to get 2,000 applicants, getting like 600 applicants. Departments that used to get 500 are getting 80, and they're struggling to hire, and it's a challenge nationwide.
It is. Police departments are 10 times worse.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to, we'll get close to the end. We got 2 more to go. We got California firefighter. Gee, a firefighter stealing again. In any event, the California firefighter was at a private business, I guess, as well. And he I think as a grant writer, I don't know if he wrote the grant, but they got a safer grant. He was hired to administer it, and he stole some money and time and all that. Don't do that. So he submitted false and fraudulent reimbursement requests. He was trying to obtain reimbursement for goods and services that weren't actually rendered or obtained, that he didn't deserve. So, just like other thieves, alleged thieves, although he's now a convicted thief, but just like other thieves, he, took advantage of money and said, no one will miss it. And he tried to take some, thinking people aren't going to take that. I got to tell you, people got to be very careful. Like theft of time, people use that. This just reminded me of a theft of time case where people say, "Oh, I'm paid to work here, but I'm also going to here, and I'm not telling each." And this to me is not just like that, but it's a firefighter stealing because, hey, there's a pot of money and I can. So there's going to be more coming, but apparently he misappropriated $1.2 million. That is ballsy to take. I don't know how much his time is worth that, but what exactly did he put in for expenses and reimbursements that get to $1.2 million? I can't imagine. What, he get a new car, 5 new cars? I
don't know. I believe, I administer our grants, and I know you put in for the money, you make a representation that the department spent it or is about to spend it within the next 30 days. So it wasn't that he needed the money, but that the departments that he was administering the grant for had either spent or are about to spend the money. And the money ended up in his accounts. And there was a quote, and I'm not sure if it was from the prosecutor or from the attorney, the prosecutor from his attorney, that said that he didn't personally profit from it, but it did support his business. It allowed him to keep his business operating. But again,
don't mess with the federal government.
I think it's important that we understand that, the feds, they're very good about, providing funds under the AFG and SAFER programs, but that it's, they are watching, they are paying attention.
And this one was for a wildland firefighter, and this is a bad, you mentioned wildland firefighter, I think was the basis of the grant. And he or the communities just happened to be devastated by wildland firefighters. I wasn't sure, but either way, bad time to be screwing with funds intended for those people or those purposes. But don't steal. I know you and I could talk about theft. I mentioned this. We could talk for hours on theft and how people steal, but when it's a firefighter, whether it's porn or theft, we make headlines. Okay, let's finish up in Nashville. I think this has to be a prelude to, we'll get back to you, right? Because we don't have all of the information on this. I would like to see the actual policy and the actual decision, but here what happens in Nashville is that there are policies designed to curb, presumably the intent was to legally curb speech that's not protected by the First Amendment or otherwise. And a judge here blocked enforcement of two policies that were intended to limit, I'm assuming, non-protected speech, but went too far and then limited protected speech. I would like to see the actual amount of it, or the actual language, the actual language in it. But the facts of this person are interesting.
Let's go through them. Let's kind of lay out the facts.
Yeah, I'm going to read what you wrote because you did a great job. So the firefighter filed suit in April. He claimed the suspension is unconstitutional. He's a comedian, right? So he's got a whole different job here. And as a comedian, he criticized a city council decision, his employer, but not as a comedian, as a firefighter. All right. So he criticizes a decision on license plate readers by posting on Twitter. He says, I hate feeding into the illusion that America's government and existence is legitimate. So I'm no fan of voting, but the majority of Nashville City Council is white supremacists. I know it's boring, but millennials have to start caring about local elections. Now, if that isn't protected speech having nothing to do with employment other than you happen to be employed by the people you're criticizing, I don't know what is. Nonetheless, the judge concluded that 2 of the 4 policies that were challenged were unconstitutional restrictions of employee free speech. Forget about the policies for a second, just the whole action of disciplining this guy for making comments about his employer in a totally different capacity and not even speaking about the fire department, right? They're just general comments that have nothing to do with the fire department. It'd be one thing if he said the license plates on the fire truck, maybe, but that's not what he said. In any event, so I really would like to see what the specific language was that was deemed to be overbroad and went after protected speech, would have inhibited protected speech. Factually, I don't know whether you agree or not, but factually, the whole background, I don't care what the policy says, what he said is protected speech, no matter what the policy tries to curb out of work activity for.
Yeah, I would just start out by saying I even though I disagree totally with his comments, it's like nails on the chalkboard when I hear that. But
let's
point being that we've got to analyze it through the Pickering balancing test, and is it a matter of public concern? Absolutely. Did he post it as a private citizen? Well, he posted it in his stage name. Okay, so there's one, aspect of it. You've got to look at his overall social media presence, but it seems to me that he did it as a private citizen. Then we get into the Pickering balancing test, and does his right to say that outweigh the city's right to shut him up? And that's why I'm not a big fan of that balancing test. But one of the key points of that is we got to look at whether or not a posting could cause actual harm and disruption to the mission and function of the fire department. I think reasonable minds can differ on whether or not it could cause actual harm. And so I think that's where you're at. But the court didn't even get to that issue. They're saying, did the non-defamation policy that you can't defame someone
Right.
violate the First Amendment as a prior restraint? And the court said, yeah, it's a prior restraint. How about you can't post anything that's going to be derogatory? That's a prior restraint. So that still leaves two of the possible charges that he's facing still open. And so it'll be interesting to see. And I think the fact that the judge didn't throw out those other two is an indication that maybe there's some validity to his violating what's left of the social media policy.
What bothers me, though, just on these kind of cursory facts, is this could happen to you and I just in this scenario on our blog, right? If we comment on something that one of our, and you and I are trying to be careful about commenting too close to home, right? But if we did, and somebody said, oh my God, Brad commented about the village of Manlius and how he doesn't like their trash collection, but he's a firefighter there. We're going to go after him because on a public stage, he criticized his employer having nothing to do with the fire department.
Right.
If I called, and there are lines, right? So here he's saying, well, you're all racist. You're white supremacists. Okay, well, if you think they are, they are. And, that's an opinion. An opinion would never constitute defamation. So the speech, I think based on, it's very hard to win defamation suits. So for the village to say, or the city to say, well, you defamed us, calling them racist isn't necessarily defamation, it's opinion, right? But let's go back, let's change the scenario. Now we say, you know what? My employer is incompetent at managing the budget and keeps raising taxes and is taxing and spending like all Democrats do, blah, blah, blah. I don't mean to make this Democrat Republican, but let's assume it got closer to home, right? Because I don't want viewers to say, well, you can criticize your employer anytime you want. No. There's probably a line where you say, okay, this starts becoming employee speech, not citizen speech, and where it's not a matter of public concern, it's more internal grievance, right? So our municipality is horrible at managing the budget, taxing and spending. They don't care about you. What I'm really talking about is I'm pissed at something about work. So, it's all this kind of scale, and when does it tip? So I think this is a bad example of, because come on, you're a comedian under a stage name, and it has, calling them racist or whatever has nothing to do with your job.
Yeah. We'll let that one go for the, for the forum to make that prediction. But bottom line is this firefighter ended up getting terminated shortly thereafter because he posted the police chief's his personal phone, but it was the city phone, but it was not but basically the cell phone number of the police chief, posted it online, social media wise. And
did he have that number only because he's a firefighter, or
I don't think so, but I don't know. But the point being that he ended up being terminated over that. And so the reason I say that is it looks like that from the city's perspective, they may have perceived him as pushing the envelope, and they felt that they needed to remove him from the payroll, and that there may be other things in the background that led them to do this beyond just this one comment. That's that would be from a couple of thousand miles away. That would be my assumption. There's something else going on here
Always
and
is.
and they usually is, and that they felt that that they needed to take a stand on this. So whether or not they picked the right thing to take the stand on,
Wouldn't be my advice, right?
That's a different story. But
well, there we are.
so yeah. All right. Well, that's we went a little bit longer than we normally do, and I will tell folks, there's my newsletter going out tomorrow is going to have some links to Beyond the Blog. There's a bunch of stories from last week that I'm only able to cover so much during the course of a week, but there's a bunch of really interesting stories in the Beyond the Blog. It'll be in my newsletter that goes out tomorrow. So I hope you'll take a look at some of those stories. I wish we had more time to do this, but life gets in the way. So,
and these are great cases. These are great issues, all great issues.
Well, if you like what you heard, please click like and share. We really want to get up to over 1,000 subscribers. We're closing in on 700. But if you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe. We really need some more. We need about 300 more. And I think once we get there, then things are going to kind of go quickly and expand exponentially from there. But please click like and share. Please subscribe. And we'll hopefully see you again next week on Fire Law Roundup. Brad, thank you very much. And we'll see you soon.